I'm joined here by Camile Sardina, and I would love you, Camille, to let us know where you're based and what do you do.
Hello, Juan. Thank you for having me on, and hello, everybody. So I am a snowbird right now. I am currently in Orlando, Florida, but I go back and forth between Orlando and New York City right now. I got to Orlando last year during the pandemic. I figured, well, if I was in New York City for like a decade, and I was ready to have a change during it because I was all alone in my apartment, and I'm like, why am I going to pay this high rent and be alone during the pandemic? So I figured, let me go amongst trees and whatnot in lakes in Florida. So I'm here right now, but I was just in New York.
Very smart, especially with the colder weather. It's just now starting to go up to the 40s here in New York City, and it's just been way too cold. So super smart. And what do you do? What do you have? What's your trade or your occupation?
Yeah, so I am what I like to call a career chameleon, meaning it takes on different forms. So I am, and I'm an author. I'm the author of a book called Change Makers. I also am a freelance writer. I am the CEO of a PR startup called Evolist Media. And my newest venture and title is the creator and host of an upcoming docu-series called Surreal Camile.
Great. And I love the synchronicity because I'm a publicist by trade, but I want to hear more about Surreal Camile. What inspired you to start this docu-series?
Ooh, the inspiration is quite rooted because I, growing up, had family members that where I would find little what seemed to be secrets about them that my parents would never talk about, such as I had a great aunt who I didn't know traveled the world as a psychic. In her house, I would find books on Italian witchcraft, and no one talked about it. And I have a grandma and my great grandma. They would read cards sometimes, but again, my parents and never talked about it. And these grandparents lived on the different side of the country, so I didn't see them all the time. Also, I remember hearing that an abuelo of mine, a bisabuelo in Puerto Rico, apparently performed seances. So basically, I had on the Italian and Puerto Rican side this collection of knowledge about just mystic things that they were either into or experiences that they had. And I thought, well, why isn't this being talked about? So that led me to probably it was a big reason of why I was into certain things, certain films that I was into, or different types of books that I was reading because of that one side of me that I felt like was never really discovered. So anyway, flash forward to what was this? Not a few years ago is when I really got the idea. And I knew I wanted to do a docu-series. I had a lot of interviewing experience for written editorial, and I knew I wanted to change that into a different format on video. And it just kind of popped in my head. I said, you know what? These are things that I've always wanted to learn more about. And I knew I wanted to do a docu-series where I was learning about something. And those were the things that caught my interest the most at the time, and still do. So that's where the idea came from, really, or the inspiration came from, really, my family. And why I chose to do a docuseries was just because I love them. I've always watched them.
And I heard you say that your Italian side of the family, your Puerto Rican side, are these both on one parent's side of the family or each of your parents' side?
So yeah, my mom is from Puerto Rico. My dad's Italian, and it just
Wow,
so both sides. Yes.
Wow, that's quite the strong ancestral presence. That's amazing.
Yeah. I think there was a scene in The Sopranos. There was a girl who was half Italian. I think she was half Italian and Cuban. And then I remember the main character, why is his name slipping my mind? But Tony Soprano, he said, "Oh, that's a dangerous combination." And I thought in my mind, yeah, I think so. So yeah, but both sides, Italian and Puerto Rican, had these different mystic parts of them that I hadn't really known about, and I came to learn about as I grew older.
That's incredible. And with the docuseries Surreal Camile, first of all, I think it's amazing that you are taking this opportunity to learn about things that you enjoy, you find curious, in the process of making this docu-series. You're going to help other people learn about those things too. Are there docu-series you can mention that have been an inspiration to you, or TV shows or films that have been a huge inspo for this project?
For sure. So I was always really, really drawn to, first of all, horror movies. That I have to say that was an inspiration. In addition to shows like, if you remember the Discovery Health Channel, it doesn't actually exist anymore, but they would
Yes.
have these shows such as like a Ripley's Believe It or Not type of shows where you would learn
Love
about,
those.
yes, weird science, Siamese twins. There was a guy that looked like he had tree branches for legs, I remember. I was so into those shows. But some current ones after when I had the idea and I was kind of doing some research to see if there were other shows similar. I didn't find an exact match, but I really, really also found inspiration in a Netflix show called Dark Tourist. And it was a journalist from New Zealand, and he travels around the world covering different stories dealing with death and destruction. Really love that show. There's also there was a funny BuzzFeed show where these two guys would go around to haunted places, I remember. I don't remember the title, but I remember that was kind of an inspiration, because I knew that with different episodes that I want to film, depending on the topic, it's not going to always be the exact tone. So yeah, those are some examples. Unsolved Mysteries. There was also an episode in Unsolved Mysteries where a group of people in different parts of Pennsylvania, I want to say, all saw a UFO on the same day.
I saw that episode. It was incredible.
It was my favorite.
Yes.
So that was another docu-series. I love the way that they filmed it. I love docu-series that feel so cinematic and artistic. And I think that became more of a thing with the streaming platforms.
I am so sad that Dark Tourist never came back for another season, at least not yet. I hope it comes back. I don't know what happened, but I love that show. And have you ever been to St. Augustine in Florida?
Yes, I have.
So the Ripley's Believe It or Not, I remember going there as a kid and falling in love with it. And I remember when that was a TV show too. Wasn't there a Ripley's TV show?
Yeah,
and it was on this.
Great. And I loved going there as a kid. In Orlando, there's also a Ripley's. And
Yes.
I don't know how many there are, but yeah, I was always into going there. And St. Augustine also, a lot of ghost stories there.
Oh yeah.
History with ghosts.
100%.
Casadega, Florida too.
Yeah. Casadega, you said?
Yeah, Casadega, Florida. It's I want to say has the phrase of it's the medium capital of the world, psychic capital of the world, and I visited there as well.
I passed through there once, and I understand it feels like just one little intersection, and half of it, at least the downtown, quote unquote downtown area, half of it is psychics, the other half is witches. That's how I always understood it. But I remember going through there when I was a very young kid, and there's actually a Casadega in upstate New York too. That's also a psychic village or something like that. But speaking of the paranormal, supernatural, ghosts, I know you have an interesting childhood experience. So can you share either a personal encounter you had with the paranormal in your past?
Oh yeah. So with the paranormal, I always was interested in it. I've only had one experience in my life though, one paranormal experience. This was enough to make me believe that truly it is real. I always felt like it was, but it verified that feeling for me. So when I was about 12 years old, I should start with this. There is a movie called Now and Then, if you've ever heard of it. It has Christina Ricci, Demi Moore. It was made in sometime in the 90s. This is a coming of age film. This is really what inspired me in the story that I'm about to tell. But in this movie, they have a seance. And I have seen this movie so many times. And so one night when I was about 12 years old in the suburbs of Florida, because I was living in Kissimmee, Florida at the time, and we had just watched that movie, me and a group of friends at a sleepover at my house. And I said, you guys, we should have a seance. And of course, everyone's first reaction is, oh, there goes Camille with her weird ideas again. She's crazy. But they said, you know what? Why not? Sure. Let's just, for shits and giggles, let's have a seance. So none of us knew what the hell what we were doing. Very important to mention. None of us have performed a seance. We were innocent 12-year-olds who just wanted to try it for the hell of it. And I thought, all right, internet was kind of a thing at the time, very slow. So maybe an hour later, like once the internet started to work, we looked at like someone who died nearby, because we thought, all right, well, I guess we have to look up a name of someone who passed away, right? So I think we looked at the obituaries and we just found a name. I don't remember the name, so let's just call him John Doe. And we said, okay, this is the person that we're going to try to speak to. And other things that we needed, a candle, because now and then in the seances, they had candles around them. We didn't have a lot of candles, but we found one. And that's it. That's all we needed. We had the candle. We had the person we wanted to speak to. It was around midnight. And we went to the driveway. It was actually, we went to my friend Jessica's driveway for whatever reason. She was our neighbor. And we sat in a circle around the driveway, very dark because it was midnight. And there was about, so 5 of us in a circle. And the candle that we were using was one of those, it was kind of a glass bowl, and there was a tinier candle in the middle of it, if you've seen candles that look like that. But that's the type of candle it was, if people are very interested in knowing the specifics to see if it could have been something else. But that was in the middle of us. So we joined hands. Our eyes were open this whole time. And I started saying, spirits, we call to you tonight to speak to John Doe. We want to know what it is like in the afterlife. Please reach out to us if you hear us. And then I told everyone, all the girls, okay, repeat after me. John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe. And then out of nowhere, this little candle in the middle of us burst into a freaking bonfire. It was a freaking bonfire bursting in the middle of us. And then the next thing I remember is screaming bloody murder, going like, oh my God, we're gonna die. And I was running as fast as I can to Jessica's door, my front door, banging on her front door and being like, I remember saying like, you know, Mr. Castro, let us in. And then I went and no one was answering. And then I run to my front door and I'm just like, mommy, poppy. And we were all just like running amok, trying to get someone's attention here at midnight in the suburbs, while this bonfire was in the middle of a driveway. And what was even crazier than the bonfire, in my opinion, was that no one came outside, because we were all screaming and we were thinking, does no one hear us? This is insane, because we were so loud because of how scared we were.
Wait, it's just to ask you, at this point, this candle didn't burst into a bonfire and then decreased back into a little flame. It stayed as this huge.
Yes, it stayed.
Okay. Wow.
Stayed. And so, yeah, and I hopefully I mentioned that at the beginning, but these are very important points. This candle was so small, and we even asked, all right, is there a scientific explanation to this? Because it's important to mention our eyes were open. None of us had something like gasoline or lighter fluid that we put on it. I can't really think of another reason why a candle as small as it was would burst into what was a bonfire. So yeah, till this day, there are still people I tell the story to that are like, well, maybe it could have been, I don't know, maybe there's something to do with the temperature. And I said, I don't know, it was a cool day. Who knows? But, you know, maybe it was like 70 or like in the upper 70s. So, but what was crazier, in my opinion, was that no one was coming out. So I don't know if it was part of what was happening, but sooner or later, we did get the fire out, because at the time, the neighborhood we lived in had a lot of construction going on. So we got sand from the, like dirt from the construction sites, and then water from a lake the water actually did not help. The water made the fire bigger, by the way.
Lakes in Florida are not, I mean, the water's questionable in lakes in Florida. So yeah, maybe that's probably why.
Yeah. So yeah, still, I guess that's the reason. But so we were like, all right, screw this water. But the dirt did work. And so sooner or later we did get the bonfire down. And then there was just this big black spot in the driveway. And I just felt like all of us together, it was me, my sister, one of my best friends, Jessica, and then two other friends of ours, two Crystals, actually, two girls named Crystal. And I just felt like we had a movie moment of, we are the only ones who saw this, and probably no one will believe us. Some will. I also want to say, after that night, I was so worried that I was cursed. And so I had this feeling up until my 20s. And I went to a psychic who told me that, no, you're not cursed. Because you were trying to bring the dead back and you didn't know what you were doing, they were basically just like, hey, leave me alone. They had a little aggressive reaction, but you're not cursed. They were just trying to make sure that you weren't being stupid, trying to have a seance when you don't know how to perform a seance again. So it was nice to know that. I wish I would have talked to someone earlier instead of having this feeling in my mind that maybe I'm cursed. But after that night, that is what made me believe that the paranormal, the supernatural, all spirits are real. They are real.
Well, cheers to not being cursed, first of all. And then second, I was actually going to ask you, how did this experience shape your perception of psychics or people who deal with the paranormal, or even things like Ouija boards or the things people do to contact the other side? How did this influence your perception of that realm of things?
Yeah. Top advice to people: do not do any of it if you haven't spoken to someone who is an expert and who knows how to do it properly, so fire doesn't blow up in your face. And thank God we're okay. Whew. So, and also after that, I didn't only believe for sure in the paranormal. That was also a realization that, there are bad spirits out there and there are good spirits. And maybe it wasn't necessarily a bad spirit, but it could have been a good spirit really trying to scare me. But who knows? But after that, I do believe that there are good and bad out there. So, spirits, demons, all of it. I do believe that it's real.
Yeah, totally. And are you the kind of person who enjoys ghost tours or paranormal investigations, or has this experience maybe closed you off from interest in those kinds of things?
It definitely hasn't closed me off. I will still go into haunted houses and ghost tours. I will say a lot of the ghost tours are corny.
True. Yes.
A lot of the
Yeah.
time. And the same thing with certain types of ghost shows. It seems a little over the top sometimes, but I'll still watch them. So yeah, no, I definitely, my interest will never go away. I will say one time I did go to a different psychic who was so spot on about things, just about other things in my life, that it actually did scare me a little bit. I know I would go to a psychic again, but it made me pause for a while to go back, because I just thought, I don't always want to know what's going to happen.
I'm the same way. I prefer not to know my future, because I think there are many possible futures, but for me, it's just so much easier. It's harder and also easier just to live in the moment. So I totally get that. Well, thanks for sharing your story. You almost had a Stranger Things experience, or I don't know if Stand By Me is the right comparison, but I feel like I was getting a Stranger Things vibe where this happened to these kids.
Kind of, right? Because the Stand By Me with the group of friends.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
It was in connection to death. They actually saw death.
So tell us a little bit more about Surreal Camile, what the premise is. What are the kinds of topics you're hitting on in your docu-series?
Oh, yeah. One of them it has not been filmed yet, so the date is still being set, but it's going to be on paranormal psychology, on the note of the paranormal. So there's a professor who teaches this, and she's going to be one of the people I'm going to interview, and she teaches a course on really how to heal people who have had paranormal experiences through this practice called paranormal psychology. So I'm really excited about that one because it's a mix of obviously the paranormal, but there's a scientific element too, which I really I like the connection between the two. And another topic is vulture culture. So this is where the Surreal Camile show isn't necessarily always spooky or witchy. It could also just be something that's unusual and maybe a little weird or kooky. So vulture culture is a group of people. It's a culture where people create things, anything from art to jewelry out of roadkill bones.
Wow.
So I interviewed someone who literally taught me how to go from roadkill you find on the side of the street to a beautiful pair of earrings. And I also want to mention this culture, they do not kill animals. They would never. They are all about kind of repurposing life, bringing these animals that have passed on a new light is the way I interpreted it. So, and then there will definitely be a combination episode of witches, psychics, and mediums. I also interviewed someone who had a near-death experience. He almost died after a snowboarding accident and became very, very depressed and suicidal. And he, one night, tried shrooms. Not because he definitely wasn't a drug addict. It wasn't like that. It was just he tried it. And he had a very healing experience, actually. And after that, he's very much an intellectual. He thought, is there something here that people haven't really discovered yet on how psychedelics might be healing? And this is before there was a lot of news about it, because you do read about it now more, and especially the microdosing. But it's quite a pioneer at the time, and he's the editor of Psychedelics Today magazine. So I loved learning his story and how that experience really changed him and got him out of depression.
That's fascinating, because I know this episode, people are listening to this episode either on or after February 28th, but we're recording this on the 10th. And yesterday I was just talking to a friend about, I have no opinion myself or judgment about shrooms, but I was talking to a friend about shrooms and psychedelics being used for healing, especially for people who've suffered from trauma. So there's definitely something to that there. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. And, I still would have to do a lot more research myself into really figuring out where I stand, because I've experimented for fun when I was in my 20s. But I always say it was always a fun time, but I never had a healing experience. So, but I do think it affects people differently. So,
totally.
Who am I to say that it can't heal? Because it clearly for him, it healed him. So it must be true.
Yeah. And I noticed that like on your Instagram, and by the sound of the vulture culture folks that you're going to cover in your docuseries, is subculture the right appropriate word to use?
Subculture, yes.
Because I think it's so fascinating to explore subcultures. Are there other subcultures that either that you feel comfortable sharing that you've covered in your docuseries and your materials, or that you really have a dream of covering?
So that's the only subculture that I've covered so far. I haven't thought about the next one I want to cover yet, but I would love to find one in South America. I would love to travel there and cover something. I've heard about psychic healers there. It's not necessarily a subculture, but if anyone's listening and they have some ideas, please send them my way. So yeah, I'm not sure which one I would want to do next.
Interesting.
Still trying to get my head around the first season.
Oh yeah, I know it's a lot of work. Do you have an interest? It sounds like you have an interest in UFOs. Are UFOs something you intend to cover in your docuseries eventually?
So I'm working on that, on collecting information and interviewing people so I can do an episode on UFOs and aliens, because that is definitely one I want to have in the first season. So I've already been talking to certain people who are like UFO experts, and or people who claim to have had alien experiences, whether they saw an alien, a UFO, or even had an abduction experience. So it'll definitely be covered, UFOs in Surreal Camile.
And do you have a personal affinity or a personal tie to UFO or UFO experiences?
I have never personally seen a UFO. However, another reason, other than, I mean, it's just such a fit for the show, and I feel like everyone wants to learn more about aliens and UFOs, but there is a story that came from my mom and my titi and my tio in Puerto Rico. Now, let's see what decade this must be. It must have been, let's say, I think it's probably in the 60s, I want to say, because I think they were around 10 years old, so maybe the late 60s. And they were in Bayamon, Puerto Rico, playing kickball one night. And from what my mom said, all of a sudden she heard one of her friends scream really loudly, one of the guy friends that she had. And they were asking him, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? And they noticed that he actually peed his pants. And he was looking up at the sky, trembling, and his hand all of a sudden was lifting and shaking, and he was pointing at the sky. And so everyone there lifted their heads up to see what he was looking at. And she described that they saw, it was 3 small discs. I believe it was in the shape of a triangle, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom. And there were colorful blinking lights going around each of the discs. And they were pretty close. And so obviously when they saw them, they were in shock. Most of them were just staring, and they didn't move, as if deers in headlights. And then all of a sudden, like the snap of a finger, they just whoosh, went right into the air and disappeared.
Wow.
And so, and my mom, she does not talk about these things. I think that there's definitely a belief in her about these things, especially because, well, when I told her about the seance, she's like, never do that again. So I know it's there, but she doesn't talk about it. So when she told me that story, and how, when she was reliving it, how she could feel the fear again. And I thought, yeah, I have never seen a UFO, but I believe it because of this story that my own mother is telling me. So that's the UFO story of my family, the one.
And this is why I love talking to folks like you, because the way I feel about spirit and the supernatural, so many people around the world have had experiences with the supernatural. That there has, if I think of myself as a true skeptic, or imagine being a true skeptic, I have to admit that there's something to this. If people around the world have their own experiences with the supernatural or something beyond that, I feel the same way about UFOs. My father had a very similar experience to what you described, in the middle of nowhere, the desert in Peru, between the capital city of Lima and his hometown of Ico. And that's 4 hours in between of just pure desert. And they were in the car. It was his uncle driving, and him and his 5 or 4 siblings at the time. And there was a flying disc above them in the middle of the desert. And back then, this was the 60s or the 70s. And back then, at that time, in that part of the country, the roads weren't too developed. It was just one paved road, one direction, one way, one direction the other way. Not today, like there's a bunch of wires and like phone lines and pit stops. So there's definitely something to these experiences. I totally believe in UFOs as well. I've had my own experiences I can go into on another day. I've never seen a disc in the sky, but my family has definitely seen like arcade lights in the sky, and weird shapes and weird blue lights that are like hovering for a moment, then just zooming out really quickly out of nowhere. It's fascinating.
That's the common denominator too. When any kind of shows that I see or different stories that I've heard, it's always that it just zooms out of nowhere,
Yep.
a millisecond out of nowhere, like as if they were never there. And so that I feel like is the ending to pretty much every story I've heard about UFOs. Sometimes maybe it'll be one, maybe it'll be a few discs. Sometimes the colors are different, at least from memory. But I will always remember that very quick zoom into the sky in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I always tell people if you stay up late or wake up early, whichever you prefer, for a meteor shower and on a clear night sky, I feel like you're bound to see something that makes you go, "What is that?" And I've seen a lot of satellites in like a clear night sky, like especially in the mountains, you see satellites go in a very like in a single trajectory and like a straight line across the sky. But there was one time I was about 10 years old, and it was the whole family we're all watching a meteor shower, and we saw what looked like what would have been a star in the night sky, but it was moving. But instead of it moving in a single, in one direct linear trajectory, it was moving across like zigzagging. And people can see, you can see my hand motion, but for people listening, it's like it was just wandering on its own path in the sky, zigzagging and doing loops. And we're like, what is that? And it was moving really fast. Just this little white, like as if a star was moving, but every star was still except for this light. And to this day, I mean, I'm convinced it was an extraterrestrial spacecraft because what else could it
Oh,
be?
absolutely. And it is crazy when you do stare at the stars, which it's hard to do in New York City, as you
It
know.
is. Oof. Yes.
Yes, pretty much impossible most of the time. But once you have those opportunities to just sit in the night and stare at the stars, you do see movement.
Yeah.
Always. There's always something where I'm like, did I just see 10 shooting stars in the last hour? I don't know, but the star is moving. So who knows? But I do think that, seeing the sky, knowing the planets are out there, people have flown into space. It always, I just hope that people don't reject, I wouldn't want people to reject the possibility of there being more out there, because people will do what they want to do. But always thought, how could you not at least think that, hey, maybe it's possible? Because who knows? And also, with different beliefs in, God and different, whatever type of God someone believes in, I also would always think, if you can believe in that, how can you not believe in an alien or spirits? Because
Right.
these are all things that is mostly that are to be believed and that are not seen. Or, well, with aliens, some people have seen that, but so yeah, that's always what I thought about it is, if you can believe that, how can you not believe this, or at least be curious about it, or not reject the fact that it could be real.
Yeah. Otherwise, that's a lot of empty space out there, like a whole bunch. It's incredible how huge our universe is. And I want to ask you, with your docu-series Surreal Camile, what do you hope viewers to walk away with after watching your docu-series?
Well, I absolutely want them to leave with the feeling of, wow, life is a lot bigger than we know. And I'm curious to learn more about these things that make life so surreal. So yeah, that's how I would want them to leave. And also just that feeling of life really is surreal, just like it is other things. So absolutely, life is surreal.
Yeah, it's so easy to get really accustomed to our own life's experience and living within our four walls, within our own city and cultures, and forgetting that there are more people out there that don't live the way we do or don't think the way we do. So it's work like yours with the docuseries that really helps people to step out of sometimes their comfort zone, but also just their frames of reference that they've lived with or grown up with or that they're used to.
And because of the different types of episodes that it would cover, because sometimes it's spooky, sometimes it's witchy, sometimes it's trippy, and sometimes it's actually really just kind of funny and entertaining. Another one that I forgot to mention was a horror. I want to do an episode on horror because I've always loved horror movies. And, you know, I interviewed people at this horror convention. So obviously there was a lot of characters and room for fun and laughs. So I really hope that it's a show that can appeal to definitely different types of personalities where, hey, if this episode isn't for you, if you're not really into the mystic and the witchiness, then go for the horror movie episode.
That's great. Absolutely great. Well, tell our listeners how they can find out more about you and your docuseries.
People can learn more about my docu-series and follow along the journey with me at Surreal Camile. That's spelled SurrealCamile, 1L. I'm a 1L Camille. And they can find at Surreal Camile for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. TikTok is way behind because I'm still trying to learn it because I'm a secret grandma at social media. But the page exists.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It was super fun, and I wish you nothing but the absolute best with your docuseries and the work ahead.
Thank you so much. You as well. Thank you for interviewing me about the show and all things surreal.
If you have a question or topic you want me to cover on Third Eyesight, head to my website, juanfranciscospirit.com/contact, and send a message my way. If you really enjoyed this episode, leave a review wherever you listen. I'd really appreciate it.